If you've been with us over the last few weeks, you'll know we're in this series called It's Not About Me. And this is a 6-week series that I put together. This is part 5 of 6. And we've been looking at a number of different things where really we're thinking about, it's not about me. It's not about all that I want. It's actually living for God and loving others. That's the whole big idea of this series. And we've looked at a number of different areas where that is a challenge, where that's what we should be doing. And this morning we're going to look at the subject of anger. Because anger is one of the ways we shout and pout that it's all about me. It's what I want, and if I don't get it, then I'm going to get angry. But when it comes to anger, anger is also something that is often misunderstood and misapplied. It's one of the emotions that we have as human beings that we often misunderstand. Because a lot of people think that anger, all anger, is completely sinful. It's always a sin. Not necessarily. Sometimes anger is the most appropriate response. Actually, anger is a capacity given to you by God because God himself gets angry. There are times when you should get angry. Sometimes anger is an evidence of love. So if anybody hurts Sarah or Ethan or Afia, I will be angry. I will get angry over that. In fact, if I didn't get angry, it would mean that I'm heartless. It means that I don't love them. It means that I don't care. I would be apathetic. Because the opposite of love is not anger. The opposite of love is apathy, just not caring. Now, there are times in life you should get angry. So the problem is not anger. The problem is whether it's appropriately or inappropriately expressed. Managed anger is actually a good thing. But the problem is so often, many of us, if not all of us, just don't know how to express it. When you grew up, nobody taught you how to manage your anger. And so therefore, as a result, what we typically do is we go to one extreme or another. So just because you don't turn into some huge volcano doesn't mean you don't have an anger problem. We all have an anger problem. And I'm going to show you the different ways we actually express that anger. So don't sit here thinking, say, well, I never blow up. I never lose my temper. I never shouting and hollering at people like some people do. Rubbish. We all do. But we just do it in different ways. So I'm going to show you this morning 6 different ways that you show it. But I want to give you the 2 extremes. First of all, let me give you the most obvious ones, because the 2 extremes are these, is that some people clam up when they're angry, and other people blow up when they get angry. Some people sort of stuff it all inside, and others just let it all out. Now, stop digging the person next to you at the moment. But there's a difference between the mute, as it were, who keeps it all quiet, and the maniac who just lets it all out all over the place. So I'm going to give you lots of different sort of examples here, but let me give you the one you might have heard this before, is that every single one of us, you're either one of these 2 things when it comes to anger, okay? You're either a rhino or you're a hedgehog, okay? Every single one of us are this. So when you get into conflict, when you get into an argument, if you're a hedgehog, this is what you will do. You will roll up into a little ball, you will withdraw, and you'll play Mary Martyr. That's what you'll do. On the other hand, if you're a rhino, well, you're just going to charge around all over the place. You don't care who is in your way. You're going to attack anyone that gets in your way. And by the way, if you are married, one of you is likely to be the rhino and the other one is likely to be the hedgehog. I don't know if you've noticed that. Some of you have, I think, by the looks on your faces. And successful marriages are not those marriages where anger or conflict doesn't exist. Rather, successful marriages have learned how to manage their anger. And the same goes in families, the same goes in friendships. Whatever relationship that might be, if you manage your anger within those relationships, you will produce great friendships, great families, great marriages, whatever it is. So this morning, I want us to look at what God actually says about how you and I can tame our tempers. Because 1 Corinthians 13:5 says this, love is not easily angered. It's in that great passage, isn't it? 1 Corinthians 13, that talks about how we might love. James 1:19 that we read earlier on says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Notice the Bible doesn't say don't get angry. It just says don't become easily angered. Be slow to become angry. And so the Bible's really clear about this, particularly in the book of Proverbs. In fact, because in that book, God gives us some really specific desires and principles on how we might build the proper use of anger. So this morning, I want us to talk about how we tame our tempers. How do we manage our anger? And I'm going to give you 6 things this morning, and they all begin with the letter R. And I'm doing this because hopefully you'll remember the message. I know you won't, but I live in hope. So I thought, well, if I give each one with the letter R, and you can try and guess what they are, it's like, just to keep you awake maybe, I don't know. But here are my 6 R's, okay? My 6 R's to deal with anger. The first is this. If you want to tame your temper, the first R is you need to resolve to manage it. That's the first step here. Resolve to manage your temper. What I mean by that is you stop saying, I can't control it. I can't control my anger, so there we go, just get on with it. You start realizing that, in fact, you can. Because when you stop making excuses for your anger, you realize that anger is a choice, just like love is a choice. Because when you get angry, you are choosing to get angry. Nobody is forcing you to get angry. Nobody can make you angry. We think that, but we say things like, oh, you make me so angry. No, they don't. Nobody can make you angry without your permission. Anger is a choice, and you choose it or you don't choose it. In fact, let me show this to you. I'll prove this to you, because you have far more control over your anger than you'd like to admit. Let me show it to you. Let me prove it to you. Let me give you an example. Let's say, and of course this is just a hypothetical thing. I'm sure none of you have done this before, so it's okay, all right? But let's say you're at home and you're having an argument. And I don't just mean, little crosswords. I mean full-blown nuclear argument, okay? It's whatever it is, somebody in your family, your husband, wife, whatever, and your voices are raised, and you're yelling, and you're getting wound up. You're really going for it, and you're upset, and you're angry, and all of a sudden, at that height of the argument, the phone rings. And you go, oh, hello. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, she's here. Oh, it's for you, my love. What happened? You turned on a penny, didn't you? Anger is highly controllable. Don't tell me you can't control it. You can control it when you want to change. And in that instance, when that phone rang and you answered, you didn't want to be embarrassed, did you? You didn't want to look bad or whatever it is. And again, sometimes when people walk in and you're having an argument, you can stop, can't you? Because you don't want to be embarrassed. You can change real quick. Anger is a choice. And therefore, you and I, we need to resolve to manage it. Look what Proverbs 29:11 says. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. And notice, circle that word keeps in that verse there, because you see that. Keeps means it's a choice. It is a responsibility. When I get angry, I am choosing to get angry. And when I say resolve to manage your anger, this is really important. Resolve to manage it in advance. That means you make the choice in advance. The time to decide to manage your anger is not when the blood pressure is rising, your adrenaline is shooting through your system, your nerves are on alert, you can feel the flush in your face, your muscles tense. No, because you've already lost the battle at that point. You resolve to manage it in advance. So before I get into that meeting, I am not going to get angry. Before I open the door home, I will not get angry. Whatever day I've gone through, whatever I've experienced, I will not be angry. Because you say, today, I am not going to get angry. I'm not going to let it get to me. And you manage it by first resolving. That means you decide in advance that I'm going to make the choices and I'm going to work on it before it actually happens. Not in the heat of the moment, because I realize that anger is a choice, and I'm going to choose today to not let anything really upset me. Now, how do you do this? Well, this is the second step, and I'm being really practical this morning because this is an area that we all need to work on. The second step is this: you do it by remember the cost. You remember the cost. Because when you remember the cost of uncontrolled anger, you'll be more motivated to manage it. You're less likely to get angry if you realize that there's always a price tag to anger, every time. The Bible's really specific on this. I could give you a dozen verses. I could give you loads of verses of the high cost of losing your temper. Let me give you a few from Proverbs. Proverbs 29:22 says, a hot-tempered man gets into all kinds of trouble. Now, we could spend the rest of the morning, if not most of the day, talk about the all kinds, couldn't we? Plenty of examples. Let me give you a few more. How many of you found this one to be true in your own life? Proverbs 15, verse 18. Hot tempers cause arguments. Anybody want to give a testimony to that one this morning? Anyone want to share? Cool, we could be here all day, couldn't we? How many times have you seen that one? How many times have you done that one? What about this one? Proverbs 14:29. Anger causes mistakes. Or Proverbs 14:17. People with hot tempers do foolish things. In fact, you've seen this, maybe you've done this, I don't know, but you can see people that lose their rag in public. They do some really embarrassing things, don't they? It's really awkward, isn't it? And by the way, when you get angry, you lose 50% IQ. Now, I don't know about you. I can't afford to lose 50% IQ. So, it's probably why we do some really silly, embarrassing things when we're angry, because 50% have just walked out the door, isn't it? You do things you'd never do, but we do when we're angry. Proverbs 11:29 says this: the fool who provokes his family to anger and resentment will finally have nothing worthwhile left. It's a good verse, isn't it? You always lose when you lose your temper. What do you lose? Well, you can lose your reputation, you can lose the respect of others, you can lose your job, you can lose the love of your family, you can lose your health. We don't often realise this, but when you say, it's such a pain in the, and you can choose whatever body part you want to fill in the blank there, it is true. Because when I swallow my anger, my stomach keeps score. Your body's not designed to handle anger. God didn't mean for you to carry rage around inside of you. When you carry anger constantly in you, you get sick. Some of the bad health some of us are perhaps suffering with is down to anger, holding resentment, bitterness inside us, because our body keeps score. It doesn't matter how well you eat. If you're carrying around anger inside of you, you will get sick. It's not so much what you eat, it's what eats you half the time, isn't it? So we need to remember the cost whenever we're tempted to lose our temper. And parents, let me talk to parents in particular. Parents learn pretty quickly that you can scare kids into doing something by getting angry at them, can't you? We often will use anger to get people to do something. Why? Well, because it works. In the short term, but in the long term, the effects are devastating. You can get people to do almost anything you want them to do by frightening them. If they are afraid of you, if they're afraid that at the slightest moment you're going to lose your temper, that you're going to suddenly just go ping and off you go as angry, well, they're going to do it because they don't want all that carnage, so they'll just do it. Or they just won't ask you about it. But in the long run, there is this price tag. In fact, there are 3 price tags. I haven't put this on the outline, but you might want to scribble this down. There are 3 price tags to anger. The first is more anger, the second is apathy, and the third is alienation. When people get angry at you, you have 3 responses. 1, you get angry back. When someone's in your face and they're pressing your buttons, you're angry back. Second, if they keep getting angry at you, pretty soon you become apathetic. And you just go, well, I can't please them. And that, by the way, is how a lot of kids feel at times. Teenagers in particular say, well, I can't please mum and dad. I won't try. They're always going on at me. They're always angry. I won't try to please them, so I won't bother. And so they become apathetic. And third, if you keep getting angry, pretty soon, to protect themselves, there becomes alienation. In other words, the relationship is broken. I don't want this relationship. I don't want a closeness in the relationship. The anger is too much. It's broken. So you get short-term obedience from your anger, but in the long term, you destroy the relationships maybe with your child or with your husband, with your wife, or significant people in your life because of your anger. And so you have to resolve to manage it. And then you have to remember the cost, because nothing destroys relationships faster than anger. Now here's the third R that the Bible speaks about, and that is reflect before reacting. In other words, think before you speak. Put your mind in gear before you put your mouth in gear. How many of us do that the other way around to our costs? Because anger control is largely a matter of mouth control. If you can watch your words, then you're going to watch your anger. So therefore, reflect before reacting. In other words, don't respond impulsively. Let there be a little bit of a delay before you respond. So Proverbs 29 verse 11 says, a stupid man gives free rein to his anger. A wise man waits and lets it grow cool. Just circle the word waits there. Do you see that? He's saying here one of the greatest tools for anger management today is delay. Just wait a minute. So, don't write that email instantly when you've read one that's really upset you. How many times have we pressed send and think, oh man, I should not have sent that email? And it bites us on the backside, doesn't it? Don't respond back when somebody says something mean-spirited to you. Don't do it. Wait, count to 10. And if you get really angry, count to 100. And if you're off the scale, well, you count as much as you need to count to just delay. Hold your temper. And notice it says, in this verse, a wise man waits and lets his anger grow cool. Notice that? That's the biblical basis to say to someone, will you cool it? Because God says, wait, give you time to think, reflect, because the longer you hold your temper, the better it improves. And have you noticed you can't put your foot in your mouth when it's closed? Have you discovered that? So just wait a minute. Stop. Reflect. By the way, talking about words, let me help everybody here this morning, because I think this is really important for us to understand this sort of thing. Did you know, men, this might help you, but ladies, this will help you as well, I think. But men, did you know that the average male speaks 25,000 words a day? That's the average guy, the average man, 25,000 words a day, okay? They also did some research and found that the average woman speaks 30,000 words a day. So, you know, that's 5,000 extra. So when a guy comes home from work and the wife comes home, guys, she's still got 5,000 words she's got to use up, okay? And really, she's got some surplus that she wants to share with her loving husband. Lovely. Isn't that wonderful? And as a loving husband, you sit and you listen. Someone asked a guy once, does it bother you that your wife always has the last word? He said, no, I'm just glad when she gets to it. Now, statistics, so the extra 5,000 words. I'm sensing a little bit of anger in the room from all of you this morning. So let's delay, let's reflect before reacting, everybody. And let's read Ephesians 4, verse 26, which says this: do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Do you know what? That's really good, isn't it? You know, if so many of us actually did that. In other words, don't carry anger from today into tomorrow. Because if you hold on to your anger for more than 24 hours, anger actually turns into resentment. And resentment is always wrong. Resentment and bitterness is always a sin. So I'm not saying delay putting it off by carrying that anger in your heart for days or weeks or months or even years on end. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're in an argument and you both start to get real vocal about it, it's okay to say, time out. Let's just take a 5-minute break. Let's just stop. Maybe you need to walk into another room. Maybe you need to just go and get some fresh air. You just need a time out. Because actually, you need to let the physical symptoms of increased blood rate and increased heart rate and adrenaline rush and all of that sort of stuff that you experience physically when you're angry, you need to let that subside a little bit. And then you come back and you talk about it when you're a little bit calmer. Now, what do you then do during the delay? Do you just sit there and get even more cross and sort of think of some really great sort of comebacks and arguments? No. You try to understand your anger. You analyze it. Look at Proverbs 19:11. It says, a man's wisdom gives him patience. In other words, you try to understand it. You try to get some wisdom. You ask yourself, what is really irritating me here? What has caused me to be angry here? Why am I feeling this way? What is this? And this is really important because the more you understand your anger, the more understanding you will be. The more you understand your wife or your husband, the more understanding you will be of your wife or your husband. The more you understand where your children are coming from, the more understanding you will be of your children. The more you understand that work colleague who is irritated with you, the more understanding you'll be with that work colleague. The more you understand yourself and why you're upset, the more understanding of yourself you're going to be. In fact, if you reflect before reacting, you can figure out what the 3 root causes are that are causing your anger. Because every time you get angry, it's one of these 3 root causes that can affect us to become anger. The first is this one that can cause you to get angry is hurt. When you get hurt, physically hurt or emotionally hurt, when you get wounded, the natural human response to hurt is to get angry. So, for example, if I'm out, say, nailing a nail into some wood and I hit my thumb with the hammer, my natural reaction is not to grieve over the hurt I'm experiencing on my thumb, is it? My natural reaction is anger. And what am I angry at? Not myself. Oh, no, it's not my fault. I'm angry at the hammer, aren't I? So I throw that hammer away. You know, I know that's what I'm cross at. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I'm angry at the hammer instead of accepting my own responsibility. But when you are hurt or you get hurt, you instinctively get angry and then you hit out at others. The second thing that can cause you to get angry is frustration. Frustration is when you get irritated when you're thwarted towards a goal. That's what frustration is. So when you're forced to wait, for example, like you have to wait in a traffic jam and you don't want to wait. Or maybe nothing is working, so you try to make something happen. So maybe you're trying to reach a goal and it's frustrating, and then you start to get angry. So for example, you buy one of those flat packs, and it says on there those famous words, easy assembly required. What a lie that is, isn't it? What a load of old nonsense. Now, if it said on there, if it had a sign that said on there, this sucker is going to take you 20 hours of your blood, sweat and tears, and it still ain't going to look right, but that's okay. You go, fair enough, I can cope with that. That's what I've got to experience. Okay. But it says easy assembly required. And then I get angry and I get frustrated because I'm frustrated that I can't put it together. Or you're on the golf course and you've got this little white ball and you're going to hit it right down the middle of the fairway. That's what you're thinking. That's your expectation. But when expectation doesn't meet reality, sometimes a broken golf club is the result, isn't it? What I'm saying here is that frustration is caused when you feel out of control, when what you hoped was going to happen doesn't happen, or you can't do it. It's out of control, and then you get angry. And the third cause of anger is fear. This is whenever you feel threatened, or you feel trapped, or you feel attacked, or you feel afraid. Because anger and insecurity go together. The more insecure you are, the more prone to anger you're going to be. So when you base your feelings about yourself, about what other people think about you, you will get angry all the time. When they don't meet your needs, or when they say things that are unkind, or they don't respond the way you expect them to respond, or they're not so appreciative about maybe that meal that you cooked for them, or the things that you did for them, whatever it is, you don't feel appreciated, you get angry. Why? Because you're looking to other people to meet needs in your life that only God can meet. And every time you look to somebody in your life to meet a need that only God can meet, you're setting yourself up for anger. You're going to be disappointed, and then therefore you become angry. Now this is really important. So often we don't understand these things, because when somebody gets angry at you, you need to try to look behind the anger and see which of these things they are feeling. It's one of the three root causes. Are they hurt? Are they frustrated? Is there fear? If somebody gets angry at you, your response is to get angry back at them, isn't it? Or to get defensive. And do you know what? So often we do this with people we love the most, don't we? Strangers, we pretty much think, well, okay, I'll need to watch myself and behave myself and that sort of stuff. Particularly if they're bigger than me, they might take me anyway. But what I'm thinking about is those people that we love the most, bets are off, aren't they? We just go at each other. And so most of the times we need to think, why are they angry? If somebody gets angry at you, your response is to get angry or defensive. But if somebody comes and says, what you said really hurt me, well, that hurts a whole lot easier to deal with than anger, isn't it? We're much more sympathetic to hurt. We need to listen to what's behind the anger. And that only happens if you reflect before reacting. You stop and you say to yourself, I don't want to blow this. I don't want to go into a full-scale argument. I know I need to manage my anger. I can manage my anger. I resolve to manage it. And I'm going to remember the cost, because it's always going to cost me when I lose my temper. I always lose when I lose my temper, so I'm going to reflect, therefore, before I react. Why am I angry? Why are they angry? Is it frustration? Is it hurt? Is it fear? And then here's what you pray. Psalm 141, verse 3. Lord, help me control my tongue. Help me to be careful about what I say. And by the way, some of you need to write these verses down on little cards and stick them in your wallet or in your purse or in your car dashboard. If you struggle from road rage, stick them in your car, definitely. But you need to memorize this. This is a great verse to remember. Because at that moment, when you are angry, when you're losing it, God will bring that to your mind. Or at the very least, maybe carry it around in your wallet, in your purse. Reflect before reacting. So my fourth principle is this: release my anger appropriately. Now remember I said earlier on that there is a right way and there's a wrong way to express anger. There's a helpful way, there's a harmful way, there's a sinful way, there's a non-sinful way. Because if anger was a sin, then, well, in effect, God is a sinner. And he can't be, because God is pure, God can never do wrong. But God could be a sinner if anger is a sin, which it isn't. God gets angry when he sees rape, when he sees child abuse. God gets angry when he sees people ripping off other people and people being unfaithful to their husband or their wife. God gets angry when he sees injustice or war. There are a lot of things in this world that are flat out evil, and you ought to get angry about those things. But I must release my anger appropriately. So Ephesians 4:26 says, if you become angry, don't let your anger lead you into sin. Again, he's not saying that anger is wrong, it's what you do with it. In other words, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. It's all about how you release it. So Proverbs 15 verse 1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. Now, we all know this, don't we? Have you noticed that if you talk loud, the person next to you talks loud back? The louder you get, the louder they get. And it just begins to escalate, doesn't it? So if you want to decrease anger in your relationships, in your marriage, in your friendships, whatever relationships you have in your life, talk low and slow. Not loud and fast, but low and slow. Because a gentle answer turns away wrath. It quiets anger. Now, whose anger does it quiet? Well, first of all, it will quieten your anger, won't it? If you calm yourself, if you start to talk low and slow, well, then it begins to calm you. When you talk loud, it makes you angrier, and the person you're arguing with gets angry too, and louder too. When you talk low and slow, it makes you calmer before it starts working on them. Now, what is the best way to deal with anger when we're going to release it? Well, first of all, don't suppress it. That's the first thing you don't do. What does that mean? It means you don't stuff it down. When you store it up inside, eventually you're going to explode. It's a bit like getting a Coke bottle or a Coke can and shaking it and shaking and shaking it. Eventually it's going to explode all over the place, isn't it? So sometimes and by the way, sometimes in a relationship, we're angry at people in our current relationships because we've not dealt with unresolved anger from the past. So sometimes someone who is innocent and we're constantly going at them, we're angry at them all the time, and it's not because we're angry with them, it's because we've got past stuff we've not dealt with. Past unresolved issues of anger and resentment and bitterness that bubbles over into our current relationships. Not always, but a lot of the times that can be the case. And therefore, if we're suppressing our anger, then actually what we're doing is that we're pushing it down. We don't talk about it. And if you don't talk about your feelings, if you don't talk about the things that you're going through, if you don't talk it through, actually then your body begins to take score, as I said earlier on. Our bodies are not designed to just hold it all. And it can cause all sorts of things, stress and anxiety and illness and tummy upsets and headaches and all sorts of things, and maybe even more major things when we're not dealing with these things. So don't suppress it. Secondly, don't repress it. That's the second thing. What does repression mean? Repression means denying. It means saying, well, I'm not angry, when very clearly you are angry. Repression means pretending you're not annoyed, that you're not irritated, that you're not mad at your husband or your wife or your mum or your dad or your brother or your sister. Don't repress it. That means pretend it didn't happen. Denial, in other words. That doesn't work either. So you don't repress it, you don't suppress it. Don't express it is number 3. And when you express your anger, you're going to tend to just create more, by the way. When you express your anger in inappropriate ways, it damages your relationship. We all have favourite ways of expressing it, by the way, and we all have got a favourite one here. They're all inappropriate. I'll explain some of them to you. Don't dig the person next to you when you go, or look at them going, oh yeah, that's it, definitely what you do. Here's one that we often do. Some of us do. Some of us, you've got a black belt in sarcasm. So when somebody gets angry, okay, your tongue is like kung fu tongue. Because you're good at cold cuts. You're good at that sort of stuff. You're actually proud of your sarcasm. You go, check that one out. That was so witty. I totally floored them with that one. You're destroying your relationships with your sarcasm. Because you cut and you cut and you cut away. Others of you, well, you're not sarcastic, but you're great at manipulation. Because your motto is, don't get mad, get even. That woman who said that thing, she will rue the day she ever said that to me, is what we say. And you figure out ways to manipulate and hurt and destroy that person who hurt you, and you do that all behind the scenes. Well, others of you don't do that, but others of you, well, you just blow up and you erupt like a volcano. And hot lava comes out everywhere, and it basically just destroys everybody around you. Others of you are so self-righteous because you're the pouter. Poor me, Mary Martyr, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, I'm going to go and eat worms. That's what we do. And everybody knows in your family, Dad's pouting again, so everybody has to walk on eggshells because if he doesn't get his way, well, it's bad time in Dodge City. Now, all of those ways are inappropriate, aren't they? So how do you do it in an appropriate way? Because you don't suppress it, you don't repress it, you don't express it. What do? God says you deal with your anger, you confess it. That's what you do. You let it out to God, because God knows anyway. You admit your anger first to yourself. That's one of the hardest things to say, because it's an issue of pride, isn't it? Actually, yeah, I am angry at times, God, and I really do blow it. And you admit it to God. You talk to God about it. You confess not just the anger, but the cause. Yeah, actually, I'm hurt here. I'm actually really frustrated about this. I'm really scared. I feel insecure. This is out of control. You get real with God, because he knows anyway. He actually just wants you to catch up. You admit the cause behind the anger. You confess it. That's how you deal effectively with your anger. Now, my fifth R in my 6 steps here is repattern your mind. Repattern your mind. And this next step is the key to permanent change, because the other 4 steps that I've given you are steps that you need to deal with in the moment, as it were. But these next 2, if you're serious about managing your anger, if you're serious to saying to yourself, I don't want to be an angry person, I want to learn the proper ways, then the Bible has a lot to say about this, a lot to teach us about this. And the key is to change the way you think. Because the way you express your anger, you didn't just get that overnight. Your pattern of behaviour is a learned response. Somebody modelled it to you. So, for example, you may have been around, you may have had parents who were always full-on arguments, and you witnessed that as a child. Well, that's what they modelled to you. And that's for you the way that you deal with anger, and it comes into your relationships. Others, they just pout and they like sulk and they never talk to each other, and you've seen that, and so that's been modelled for you. Anger is a learned response. You didn't just automatically choose it. Now, the good news is you can unlearn it. You don't have to stay that way. You can learn new patterns and habits, and you don't have to keep perpetuating what your parents, or in fact their parents, or even their parents have done over 3 or 4 generations. Sometimes it just goes down through families. You see that pattern. Every time you get angry in inappropriate ways, by the way, if you've got children, you are modelling it to your children. You're teaching how to do it the wrong way. And actually, other people who you have an influence with, a significant influence with, how you model things to them can have a big impact, particularly how you deal with anger. So somebody has to break the chain. And so therefore, we repattern our minds. Look what Romans 12 verse 2 says. Don't copy the behaviour and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. That's the key to learning a new way to handle your anger. Change the way you think. Because when you act in angry ways, it's because you feel angry. So follow me on this. When you feel angry, it's because you're choosing to think angry thoughts. The way I think affects the way that I feel. Every time I feel something, it's because I'm thinking something. Every emotion you feel has a thought behind it. When you think this, then you're going to act like that. And the way I think determines the way I feel, and the way I feel determines the way I act. Do you see what I mean? So let's say you have a tendency to fly off the handle. You don't focus on the behaviour or even the way you feel. You start by changing the way that you think. Because if you change that thought, that mental process, it's going to change the way that you feel, and it's going to therefore change your behaviour. So Romans 12:2 in the NIV says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's what God does. He's the one who can change those thought patterns in your mind. And to break the habit of anger, you have to get some mental reconditioning, as it were. Now, here's an interesting thing. Part of that reconditioning process means getting away from things that make you angry as much as possible. So Proverbs 22:24 tells us to keep away from angry, short-tempered people, or you will learn to be like them. Anger is contagious, isn't it? We need to understand that you cannot change anybody else, so stop trying. See, if you're in a relationship with someone who is an angry person, whether that you're married to them or whether they're a member of your family, that's really hard. And we try to change them. We have this sort of like change process that we're doing behind the scenes. They don't know about it, but we're trying to change them in that sort of stuff. Stop trying. It ain't going to work. Only until the fear of change is exceeded by the pain will anybody change. So what do you do? What do you do if you're living with an angry person? All you can do in that relationship, if you are living with an angry person, is change you. Change you. If you change you and you don't respond the same way that you used to when you're in that full-blown argument or whatever it is, or the way they respond, you mirror that and you don't do that anymore, they'll suddenly go, wait a minute, what's going on here? This isn't working. You change you, it will change the relationship. So often we want to blame the other person, but actually the change needs to start with us first of all. And you say, well, how do I learn the good pattern of anger management? Well, here is the main point. Here's the main way it happens. Number 6, rely on God's help. All these things are practical help, and all these things are important. All these things we need to put in place, but ultimately we need to rely on God's help. This isn't going to be resolved by some self-help book or some seminar or some sort of counselling thing. As good as it is and as important as it is, and they all have a place, ultimately the real secret to God's power to change you is on the inside. Look at Romans 15, verse 5. It says this: patience and encouragement come from God. I pray God will help you to agree with each other. In other words, you stop fighting all the time. You stop, that you agree with each other the way Christ Jesus wants. Now, here's an important thing. Your relationship and your closeness to Jesus Christ will determine the amount of patience you have in your life. So if you're close to Jesus Christ at the moment, you probably have a lot of patience in your life. Because actually, the love of Christ is impacting you, your closeness to him, therefore you're patient, you're becoming like Christ. If you're kind of wishy-washy in your relationship to Christ, well then you're going to be sometimes patient and other times not. And if you're on kind of the fringe in your relationship to Christ, you will have problems with anger all your life. You're going to have problems with being patient all your life because you don't have the love of God in you. I'm not talking about this superficial love. I'm talking about the supernatural love that you only get through Christ, get through a relationship with Christ so that you can know God. Now, how does God manage my anger? Well, look at Galatians 5, verse 22. He says, the fruit of the Spirit is patience. It is God indwelt in us by the Spirit of God that changes us. In other words, when God's Spirit is in me, he fills me with love and with joy and with peace and with patience and so on and so forth. He fills us with the fruit of the Spirit. And when you're filled with the fruit of the Spirit, it's very hard to be angry. It's very hard to do the flip side of those things. And therefore, how does God help me with my bad habit of anger? Well, he does this. He goes straight to the heart of the problem. And the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. It starts in the heart, you see. It doesn't start in your behaviour or your background, so don't start blaming those sorts of things. It doesn't start with your attitudes and your feelings and emotions. They play into it, but it's not actually the cause. It starts in the heart, because Matthew 12:34 says, whatever is in your heart determines what you will say. So the problem is not your tongue, it's not what you say, it's not your mouth, it's in your heart. Because my mouth just betrays what I'm really like on the inside, what's inside of me. What's inside of me will come out by what I say. You find somebody with a harsh tongue, a cutting tongue, it reveals a very angry heart. You find somebody with a negative tongue, you know they've got a fearful heart. You find somebody with a boasting tongue, you know that they have an insecure heart. You find somebody with a judgmental tongue, you know they've got a guilty heart. You find somebody with a critical tongue, you know they've got a bitter heart. You find somebody with a filthy tongue, you know they've got an impure heart. On the other hand, if you find somebody who's always encouraging, they have a happy heart. If they're always speaking in gentle ways, you know they have a loving heart. If they're always being loving and controlled in their words, you know they've got a peaceful heart. So what you and I need is we need a heart transplant. We need a new heart. David himself says in Psalm 51 verse 10, create in me a clean heart, O God. That's what you need to say. God, I need a clean heart. I need a heart transplant. See, Jesus can replace a hurting heart and all the pain that you experience with a sense of his love. God says, I care about your pain. It really matters to me. I will help you in the healing. So maybe you have a frustrated heart. Well, God can fill that with his peace. Maybe you've got an insecure heart. He can fill it with confidence, not in yourself, but in confidence in him. If your heart is crying out inside, it's because you haven't ever fully received the warmth and security of Jesus Christ. In other words, you've never invited the Lord Jesus Christ into your heart. But when you do that, God promises this in Ezekiel 36:26. And I will give you a new heart with new and right desires, and I will put a new spirit in you. I will take out your stony heart of sin and give you a new, obedient heart. Let's pray together. And our Father, it's sad, but it's so often true that we often get angry at the people we love the most, the people we're closest to. It's often, Lord, because we forget that you are the source of all we need, not other people. And so, Father, help us to remember that when we expect anybody else to meet our deepest needs, we're going to be disappointed and we're going to get angry. When we expect other people to be God in our lives to meet all our needs, help us to realize that we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment and anger. And Lord, I'm certain that there are many people here who are struggling with anger, and I ask you to help them, whatever the hurt or the frustration or the insecurity, help them to experience hope and healing today. Now, you may want to echo the words of this prayer that I'm going to pray. You may just want to say them quietly in your heart. Father, I admit that I have a problem with my anger, and I don't want to stay that way. I need your help. I need you to do a heart transplant in me. I need you to fill my heart with your love. And today, with your help, I want to start practicing these steps. Today, I'm resolving to learn how to manage my anger. I'm very aware of how my anger has hurt other people, including those that I love, and I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Forgive me for the times I've tried to control things and then getting angry when I couldn't. Help me to reflect before reacting, to pause, to put my mind and heart in gear before my mouth. Help me to learn to release my anger appropriately, to not repress it or suppress it or express it in sarcasm or manipulation, but help me to repattern my mind. And I confess that I need your help. And so, Jesus, today I open my life, every room of my heart completely to you. Come into my life and save me and change me. Make the changes only you can make. And our Father, we thank you for your word, that it is so practical, it is so relevant, that it helps us in every area of our life. Lord, we want to be filled with you and your peace and your joy. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.